and get back to very vibrant recycling because it's so important for our future and for sustainability here in our country. Okay, so I pushed the button and it didn't work. Help!
Is it not working then?
No, I pushed the button and it didn't work. I can talk without it. It's better when you get pictures. So I'll start before the slide comes. We're in really exciting times environmentally, and every field sort of has levels of maturity. And we sort of, the Earth things that started so many years ago, 1970 was sort of the birth, and we're pretty mature now environmentally, and things happen that shake things up, and it becomes kind of more exciting again. And we're in that kind of a period now. I think we're in a time of great change. We lived, many of us, through the 60s. I think environmentally we're entering another period that's going to be very interesting. Climate change, of course, is at the epicenter of that issue. We have microplastics in our environment. I had a chance to work with Woodbridge professors in the spring. We put on the state's first conference on microplastics in the urban environment. It was very, very interesting. It is an issue we need to be concerned about. There are microplastics in every single one of our bodies. That's a proven fact. Not too distant future, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than there are fish. And such a high percentage of the world's population depends on fish for sustenance and protein. It's very significant. We don't know yet is whether the plastics in our body are metabolized, meaning we get rid of them, or they have the potential to cause health effects. That's the $64,000 question that we don't know. We do know, some of the Rutgers professors are very interesting, in mice, they've actually been able to prove in utero transfer of plastics from a mother to a baby mouse. So it's pervasive in our chain of being at this point. Hopefully it doesn't mean anything, but that's really, imagine if it does. Not to be an alarmist, but imagine if it does, that's really significant. On the more positive side, on the plastic side of the world, I think we have a groundswell, a very interesting response to plastic bags, single-use plastic bags, single-serve restaurant takeout materials, straws. At this point in time, we're up to 45 towns in New Jersey that have bans on those materials. We have another 23 in the pipeline. So kind of sort of round numbers, 70 towns are on the way to bans or have bans. Just the towns that have them in place now, some big ones, Jersey City, Bayonne, you take those two together, that's the population of Somerset County. About 350,000 people. So my little back of the envelope calculation today, we have over 1 million people living in towns where we have those kinds of bans.
And this town just banned them.
Sorry?
This town just banned them this week.
Yeah, it's like every week there's more towns coming forward. And we do have a statewide bill that, in my opinion, is a very good bill that deals with all those same materials and would be a statewide ban. 10 other states have bans on plastics, and in our legislative process, they say it's like bacon sausage. It really is, and a big part of it was already used. It's very complicated. We have this really interesting thing coming up in a couple weeks. We have an election on November 5th, and that's referred to as lame duck, which means we're going to get a whole new assembly, incumbents, but new people too. And you have a period of time before the next session, which will be in mid-January, where anything can happen. That's why they call it lame duck, is they have people going out, and maybe this bill can get passed, which would be very, very interesting. Oh, you got it? I can see the slides.
Are there any counties where the entire county is?
Just at the, I know how to, this.
Oh, you go from that. Yeah.
Where's the slideshow? Sorry for a minute. It's hard to talk and do this at the same time. It did work. Yay, okay.
Gary, are there any counties where the entire county is
Dan?
Yeah.
No, it hasn't been done on a county level. It's been only done on a
just
town
on
level.
the town?
Yeah, and hopefully the statewide ban will go through. And I'll finish this thought. Well, I'll stay where I am. Just two other things. Yes, ma'am.
But Atlantic County has bans in their county parks.
Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't heard that. Yeah, very neat, very neat. Two other like big things that I wanted to explain sort of internationally that are interested. When I was at DEP, it was the bad old days. 1979 I started, and we would have to chase industry for polluting the environment. Drag them to court, try to put people in jail, the whole night. Very adversarial, very adversarial. And we're seeing, I think, a change in corporate America, which I think is a very positive change. So all the entities that are essentially responsible for plastics, which is the petrochemical industry, Exxon Mobil, Chevron, you name it, Procter & Gamble, manufacturers, the very largest waste and wastewater companies in the world, Suez and Veolia, have all gotten together and created an organization. It's called the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and they've contributed $1.5 billion into a fund to begin to address plastics in the environment. That's a stark contrast to earlier in my career when you were fighting over this stuff. Now, I will say, when I mentioned that microplastics thing I tried to work with Rutgers on, I tried to get somebody from this organization to come and speak, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, and nobody would answer the phone. And, to be fair, they're still like in a forming kind of a phase. I thought it would be great if they could come and talk to a statewide audience, right, about what they're doing. So hopefully it's going to be a real thing. The other big one, and that I want to mention, I hope you're all familiar with loop. No loops in the room. All right, I see a looper here. So loop, we talk about the 3 R's, right? Reduce, reuse, recycle. Recycling we spent a lot of time on in Mandatory, New Jersey for 32 years. Reuse, really hard to quantify. It's sort of like when you drop your stuff off at the textile place, or you go to a garage sale, or you buy a used car. They're all elements of reuse. Very hard to quantify that. We really haven't quantified that. The first R is the one that we've kind of failed so far, which is reduce. So I'll give you like a fun fact. In 1995, statewide generation of waste was 16.7 million tons. And when I say generation, picture your collection bay. You have a waste receptacle out front, you have a recycling bucket, right? You add those two together, that's how you count generation. Most recent statistics, our generation is 22.7 million tons. We're not going in the right direction. We continue as a society in New Jersey, and really across the country, to generate more stuff. We really got to curb that. We really have to curb that. I mentioned loop, because loop could be a reduce game changer. So we have a company in Trenton. If you haven't heard of them, look them up. You'll get a real kick out of it. They're called TerraCycle.
Yes,
and they do the strangest recycling. They've collected millions and millions of cigarette butts, and they've taken them and manufactured clothing. They take chip bags and stuff like that, and they manufacture backpacks and other stuff like that. The leader of TerraCycle is very dynamic, and he's worked internationally to put together the largest returnable commodity program in the history of the world. And it's predicated on all the consumer products we use: shampoo, toothpaste, conditioner, Haagen-Dazs ice cream, all kinds of stuff. That is all going to be brought to you like the milkman used to in the past, and be dropped off at your house, sort of taking advantage of the Amazon.com phenomenon. Everybody likes to push a button and have stuff come to them. And if it can work and be profitable, it could be an absolute game changer environmentally, I think. Because 30% of the waste that we throw out is packaging. So it could really put a dent in packaging. And they piloted this earlier in the year in Paris, in New York City, and Toronto, next year London, throughout Germany, and pretty soon, maybe even next year, at least in the New York area. You know how we have like the healthy aisle in supermarkets today, which is a great thing? We're going to have a loop aisle. And all the packaging will be returnable. And hopefully it's going to work. We'll see. So I'll go back to where I was going to start. Thank you very much for getting it fixed. So just to get rid of some misconceptions about recycling, which are very, very common, sort of in your own mind, think about what's your image of recycling. And I'll share mine. Being of my age, it's a Norman Rockwell print that is a Boy Scout with a little red wagon and newspapers in a bundle. It's wholesome, it's mom and apple pie, it's a great thing. And that's a great image, but it's totally wrong. This is the real image of what recycling is. It is, in fact, the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. It is buying and selling commodities every single day. It is an incredibly competitive business, cutthroat business, very hard to stay in business. So I want you to sort of lose the image of the Boy Scout thing and think about what recycling really is. It's very, very complicated. We've seen this logo a zillion times. It actually came from an international competition, and a Berkeley hippie kid that was a student came up with this logo. It became the national logo for recycling. And the arrows actually mean something. And I hope in the future when you see those arrows, you kind of think more holistically about recycling. The first one we all participate in, which is collection. You all clean your stuff out, put it at the curb, truck comes and takes it. Comes to a place like Bayshore. We accept 1,000 tons per day of curbside material from about 1.2 million people. And what we do is systematically through machines, take apart everything you mix together. And that's called a processor. That's how it works. But the third marked arrow is really the most important. If you do all that work, think about you cleaning out that Skippy peanut butter jar, right, and everything else, and somebody picks it up and bring it to a processor. We have all these machines and people that take it all back apart. You have to be able to sell it to somebody. If you can't sell it, if you don't have a market, you don't have recycling. It doesn't go around. That's what the arrows are telling us. It's circular. It is sustainability. You don't have all three pieces, you don't have recycling. So markets are our current problem. So where did it all begin? You probably know a lot about this. I'm going to go very, very quickly. What we did is very normal in environmental infrastructure in history. When we had a problem starting out in the 70s, we actually had a dump in every single town. Some towns were special, had 2 or 3. One of the first projects I worked on in 1980 was called an open dump inventory. We found 630 open dumps in the state of New Jersey. And these were dumps. They were dumps. They were just a hole in the ground with garbage in it, no differentiation whatsoever between the types of waste. Today, everything is completely differentiated. When I say a dump, it took garbage, hazardous waste, septage, sludge, medical waste, radiologicals, anything went in those holes. And a lot of those sites became Superfund sites that we had to clean up. With that backdrop, our legislature came in and sort of assigned counties with the responsibility of siting new facilities. Counties did a tremendous job. We sited and built 12 double composite modern landfills, 5 mass burn incinerators, a bunch of transfer stations. But the point is, after we did all that and spent round numbers $1.2 billion building statewide environmental infrastructure for waste, the legislature said, we kind of forgot recycling. So we're going to make recycling mandatory. So think about that for a minute. You spent all this money and you built facilities sized to take certain amounts of waste, and you just passed a law to take as much as you possibly could away from it. So it was a very interesting history, but not unusual. We normally in society think about the big box thing, and then we come back to the easier solutions later. So that's kind of what happened. So 1987, we get the Mandatory Recycling Act, first state in the country to have mandatory recycling. It was an extremely difficult thing for our legislature to do. It was a 2-year debate. I was sort of in the room when it got signed. You know, it was a really exciting moment, but it was very difficult because it's changed the behavior in the kitchens of round numbers 9 million people. So it was a really, really big deal. The law was kind of brilliant because it set a floor and not a ceiling. So it gave the responsibility to counties to pick at least 3 materials that you have to recycle, and it was a statewide ban on leaves. I grew up in a tenement in downtown Patterson. Even in Patterson, in the fall, people had 55-gallon drums and they burn their leaves. One of the absolute worst things you can do for your environment. So our legislature was really astute and said, no more of that. You got to compost the leaves. The 3 materials the counties picked, very logically, going back to what I talked about with the arrows, the only ones that had markets were newspapers, bottles, and cans. So they were the 3 designated materials. However, that was a floor. And in a minute, I'll tell you where we are today. Another misconception of recycling, no one is exempt. No one's ever been exempt. So any building you walk into technically should have a provision for recycling. In my sort of assessment, curbside, we've done tremendously well. Really, really well. Where we've kind of fallen down is commercial institutional. You know, how many stores, office buildings, malls, kind of you name it. Stayed in for forever would make me nuts. You go to a Giants game, No provision for recycling. You gotta be kidding me. So it's the Sports and Exposition Authority of the state. We did get that changed, but you get the point. That's still sort of one of our challenges, getting commercial institutional material done. We set goals by statute in 1993 of recycling 50% of the municipal waste stream, 60% of the total waste stream. The difference is the big heavy stuff. So the difference between the municipal and the total are big I-beams, big construction demolition materials, that kind of thing. And we wanted the two goals because the rest of the country only measures on the 50% number. So we wanted to be able to equate our numbers with other states around the country, but we also wanted to make sure we looked at all recycling, including the heavy stuff, because that takes up landfill space as well. You want to make sure that you can recycle that. Today, we're still mandatory. Kind of interesting on the numbers. We've never achieved the municipal waste stream recycling goal. The highest we've ever come is 44%. And this past data year, we did hit that number. On 3 different years, I think we hit a 44% recycling rate. We've exceeded the 60% rate on 4 different years. And the most current data year is 61%. The national average for recycling is 34%. So New Jersey remains an extremely prolific recycling state, and still one of the few states that's mandatory in the country. So it still is a major part of our economy. I talked about all this. I'm going to move on. This is an average of the number of materials that counties have for recycling today. It's up to 16 materials. You kind of know these materials. I won't go through them all. It's all the mixed plastics, mixed paper, white goods, concrete, asphalt, brick, block, brush, leaves, organics. It's really comprehensive. It really is, I think, a national success story. When we built those facilities I mentioned back in the 80s, every county essentially did what's called a composition study. It's a glorified name for taking a bunch of garbage trucks from the county, dumping them on a big parking lot, and getting a bunch of kids, mainly like high school kids, graduate students, to sift through all of that. It's like a big dumpster dive. And what we did is we actually had those materials separated into 34 different piles. When we looked at the state database, that's what it broke down to break down every commodity. And you kind of had to do that to figure out what you're going to plan for the future, right? If like for counties that built an incinerator, you have to know what part of the waste stream is burnable and what isn't burnable. And then for the portion that isn't burnable, what kind of system you're going to design to attach it. You get the point. After we built the facilities I mentioned, nobody did one of these studies for 25 years. And 3 or 4 years ago, Mercer County did the first composition study in a long time. It was really interesting because it kind of answered the question, what's left in the garbage can after 30 years of mandatory recycling? This is the answer. And it's kind of interesting. The poster child, which we can talk about in great detail, I've been super involved with it, is food. That's sort of the next frontier of recycling. We're in a really exciting place right now with food, which I'll talk more about. Roughly 25% of what's left in the can. But look at the other 16% is plastics. 21% is still paper after all that time of recycling. Just very revealing, very, very interesting. All right, so I kind of did this slide when I didn't have slides. And so I'll kind of skip over it. I think I mentioned everything here, right? Microplastics, the bans, everything else. So we'll keep going. And I mentioned loop. So I kind of threw out that we're in the Great Depression of recycling. So let's talk about that a little further. Why do we have a problem? And you can diagnose like any other problem. It's not one single thing. There's multiple things. Over time, you remember going back when we started recycling, everything had to be separate. Newspapers in one container, aluminum cans in another, all the glass had to be in separate containers, amber, clear, brown, right? Everything separate. And over time, to make recycling more convenient, we put it together, and the term of art for that is dual stream, right? So what you have is in one container, all your fiber, paper, cardboard, chipboard, whatever is recyclable in the county, and the other, everything else, bottles, cans. Then, over time, somebody said, really the hauling industry, largely the state said, what about putting it all together? And that's called single stream. And when you do that, you have one container. It's very convenient for the homeowner, for the business. But what's the problem? I'm sure you can think of what the problem is: contamination, right? So when you mix it, I'm glad we're past the dinner hour. If you have a party, graduation party, birthday party, wedding, you have all these people over, you have a soda, bottle, beer, wine, whatever else, people really clean all their containers out. Come on. No way. So when you mix all that together with the paper and the cardboard, what do you think it does to the fiber? By the time a lot of this stuff reaches a place like Bayshore, it's already decomposing, right? And what's interesting at our facility, so the way processing facilities work, in a big tipping floor, just a huge garage. Essentially, we dump everything to start the process and take it back apart. We get all of Somerset County, which is 22 towns, that's dual stream, and the rest of our towns are single stream, largely. Night and day difference in terms of the contamination. And it's a real problem. Everyone's aware of what happened in China, right, with markets. Just, very briefly, a long time ago, probably as far back as 15 years or so, China had legislation, essentially, that it passed that would crack down on the type of material that would be received from people saying it was recyclables. Unfortunately, rampant corruption on the docks in China, and they never enforced that law. So people got used to sending material they really shouldn't have sent to China. And like for a Bayshore, you can come to our facility anytime and you'll see what real recycling is like. And you look at it and go, yeah, that's a bale of paper, that's a bale of plastic, whatever it is. A lot of people were sending garbage, essentially garbage. And then they started to enforce, and they called it the Green Fence Initiative. And what they would do is start to really inspect all the sea-land containers. Picture a ship, an entire ship full of boxes like you see in Port Newark that has recyclables in it. And if they opened up a box and they found garbage, they would turn the whole ship around. Not just the container, the whole ship. So imagine being a company like a Bayshore where you work hard to do it right, and all your containers are on that same ship, and now you've got to eat that. It comes back to you, and you lost that entire amount of revenue because you can't market that material. The other part of this, which is extremely important, because it was so cheap to export materials internationally, primarily to China, all of our mills shut. Not all, but most. The domestic processing capacity went away. South Jersey, Cumberland County, Wheaton Glass, the absolute kingpin of glass manufacturing in the country. Not a single facility left. Most of our paper mills, gone. So we have very, very limited domestic processing capacity. It got worse. China, after the green fence, they still were accepting material. And then they took the next step and they called it the green sword. And really the analogy is almost like the green sword. And they set a residue amount of 0.5%, which is not attainable with any machine that you have. It's not possible to get to that level. You can get to 5%, you might be able to get to 3%. You're not going to get to 0.5%. So what it is, it's a fake way of putting an international ban on the acceptance of recycled material. Then it got worse, because other countries were taking material, primarily in Southeast Asia, and now they're all following suit. Vietnam, Malaysia, Cambodia, India, we're all doing the same thing. If China's not going to take people's junk, we're not going to take it either. And in a way, you can't blame. That's not a blame thing. But you can see the scenario that played out. All the eggs went in the basket of international shipment. The international shipment shut down, and what do you have? Go back to our high school or college economics and supply and demand. So nothing has changed on the supply side. We still have mandatory recycling. Everybody's still doing their thing and putting the stuff out. You have very, very few places to sell it. Going back to those arrows that I talked about. So we have, in economic terms, a significant market disruption where we have too much supply, not enough demand. What happens in that scenario? It's called a buyer's market. So the people that run the markets, this is their happy day, because they can charge whatever they want to charge. And you got to go there or go to the landfill, which is even more money. So what happened, just to throw some dollars out, like 3 years ago or so, Bayshore would pay towns like $10 a ton for the benefit of getting their great stuff, and we would process it and we can make money on it. The way the market has shifted, we have to charge towns now for single stream material $65 a ton. And we're among the cheapest around. I've seen $75, I've seen $85 per ton. And what's really scary about that is the average cost of disposal in New Jersey is $75 per ton. So for the first time in our history, I never ever thought we'd see the day. In some places, the cost of recycling is higher than the cost of disposal. It always was economically a no-brainer that you would recycle. So this is how challenging this is. And I hate to bring up these negatives, but it's reality. That's kind of where we are today. We need to talk about it. If that weren't enough, is recycling confusing? Caps on or caps off? Whatever your answer is, it's wrong. And I say that only because the answer is whatever your county tells you to do. And Larry and Chris are here as the experts in Morris County from the Utilities Authority. So that's the right answer, but in reality, it depends on the processing facility. So for Bayshore, everything we have is machines. So for plastics, we have optical scanners. And these things are amazing. They can tell the difference between a water bottle and a milk jug instantaneously and blow a differential stream of air at one versus the other, and one goes one way and one goes the other way. If you crush the thing too much, the optical scanner can't read it. And if you keep the cap on tight, they pop when you put them in a bin, and it causes operational problems. So for us, like if we had our druthers, our answer is slightly deflated with cap on. Now, does that work? Of course it doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. Pizza box in or out?
Out.
Depends on where you are. I recycle all my pizza boxes, unless they are super greased over, to the point where it's kind of like a common sense test. You look at it and go, hey, that's bad. I'm not putting that in. But most of the time, you got that little thin piece of fiber paper that's in there, and the cheese is stuck on there. And the box is fine. They're highly recyclable. You get the point. It depends. It depends. It doesn't work. That's too confusing for people. So under the law, and I kind of explained it before, 21 counties, there's 21 different lists. And they're not like radically different, but they're different. And one of the programs, hopefully you're familiar with it, I'm very involved, is Sustainable Jersey. I'm the vice chair of Sustainable Jersey. What we do is we push the envelope as much as we can to get you to go beyond that list. So in theory, there's 565 lists for the towns, 21 lists for the counties. It doesn't work. So in a minute, I'm going to talk about how we fix all this stuff. But you get the point. It's just too confusing. The wishful recycling thing, we're victims of our own success. We beat the drum on recycling so much that people think everything is recycled. You should see the stuff we get at Bayshore. Everyone thinks garden hoses are recycled. And it's hard to come up with a term. I'm so happy. It's such a great term. Tanglers. And it's a combination of rope and twine and hose and VHS tape, anything that can wrap around the equipment. The single-use plastic stuff, nightmare. Nightmare for a facility. We could operate a sports store. Everybody thinks their basketball, their baseball bat, the catcher's mitt, the mask, it's got any piece in it that is metal or, I don't know, people think leather or rubber are recyclable, they're really bad. Crazy. The worst one, second week we were in operation, our operation manager comes in and he puts 2 shopping bags chock full of needles and syringes. Now, it's probably at-home diabetics. Are they being malicious? Absolutely not. It goes back to this wishful recycling thing. Look at a needle. What is it made up of? This part's metal, this part's plastic. It's got to be recyclable. And that stuff, we have to shut our system down at least twice a day and send humans in every piece of it to pull all that junk out. It's not good. It's not good. Wishful recycling is a serious, serious problem. I mentioned supply and demand. I mentioned the economics. But just some pictures, and I'll comment on materials. That the other, I think, common misconception of recycling, understandably, is that there's gold in them hills, right? And all the stuff is equal. It's not all equal. It's very, very different. It is the stock exchange. It is commodities exchange. So here's primarily cardboard. Cardboard's doing pretty good. Aluminum cans, terrific. Aluminum has a great value. pretty consistent value. This is colored high-density polyethylene, which essentially is laundry detergent, colored materials. Decent market. Number one, polyethylene tarantine, which is the water bottles. Pretty good market. Pretty good market. There's PET bottles. Pretty good market. Mixed paper, boo. Bad market. Bad market. Insult to injury as a recycler. Bad enough times for us to get market share and be able to go to markets. We have to buy more and more equipment to get our material cleaner and cleaner. So we had to put in a whole additional multi-million-dollar paper separation facility to be able to sell our cleanest paper at a decent price to offset the cost of stuff like this, which is mixed paper. Another misconception, recyclers always get paid. You don't always get paid. You know, for a lot of the materials, we don't get paid, we pay. We have to pay to recycle. We're not disposing of it, but we have to pay to recycle it. So as long as it's a low-grade market for mixed paper, and making it up, we can pay $35 a ton. That's better than half the price of a landfill, which is average $75 a ton. You get the point. So the way it'll work, will give you like an analogy. We took all the Walmarts in the area, and Walmart, almost everything comes to Walmart in a cardboard box. It's used one time. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful material. The other side of the coin, every piece of clothing that comes to a Walmart is like a dry cleaner. It's got a little piece of plastic on it. It's on plastic hangers. No value. No value. But we find places that'll take that to make lumber or make something else, and we pay for them to take it. But the price you can get for the cardboard and the quality of that cardboard offsets the cost avoidance for the other materials. You get the point. The paper's rough. This is the worst. This is like the heartstrings. There's like almost no market left in glass. Glass is safe. There's no value to glass right now. I hate to even say that. It's like a foundation element, right, of recycling. But that's the deal. There's almost no place to send glass.
Question.
So, yeah.
Was there historically a good value for glass that you've seen?
You know, what has happened over time is plastics have become so cheap, they outcompete glass. And there just is no comparison. And glass, you know, like we talk sustainability, life cycle cost analysis, glass is sort of at the epicenter of that because it is the stuff that you have to clean out, supposedly. It's the heaviest stuff in the waste stream, so it takes a lot of energy to move that stuff. You separate it all, it breaks all over the place, and the more it breaks, the harder it is to market. And then on top of it, there's nowhere to sell it. So it's really a problem material. And we'll talk in a minute about, yes sir, please.
If you had the deposit, like they still do in certain states, that's another form of recycling.
You know, and that's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. And we kind of had the bottle bill debate back in the early 80s, and it was another really interesting debate. And at the time, the entity that opposed it the most, the group is called the New Jersey Food Council. And it's basically, they represent all the supermarkets and the fast food places and, around the state. And they were like, you know, this is the truth. The supermarkets operate on a very low margin. They don't make a ton of money. And they're like, you gotta be kidding me. Now you're gonna make me a recycler? We're gonna have to take all that stuff? And back when that debate was going on in the early 80s, I know what you're thinking of, because I'm thinking the same thing. It's like a vending machine today. It works really well, the bottle bills. You go up to like a vending machine outside a supermarket, it doesn't take up much space, you put the thing in, it spits out a receipt, you can leave and get money. You know, it works. Back then that didn't exist. The technology didn't exist. So what we settled for, you probably are all familiar with, it's called the Clean Communities Program. And Clean Communities, a bottle bill will go after bottles and cans. Clean Communities Program goes after everything. And it's one of the few, you'll hear a term of art often in the environmental space of extended producer responsibility, right? And what that means is industry is paid for the best they make. Clean Communities, that's how it works. It's actually based on, I never get this right, 0.00001 of every penny of sales from litter producing industries goes into an annual fund. It's like 25 million bucks a year. It's substantial. And that money gets kicked back to most of the towns, not all, it's like 570 of the towns, based on their road miles, to clean up the litter. So industry, in that case, it's a rare case. We've already had 3 laws in my recollection in the history of New Jersey that is extended producer responsibility. Clean Communities is one. So back to your point, sorry a long-winded answer, but I wanted to explain it as well as I could. back to your point, I think it'd be interesting to think about layering a bottle bill on clean communities now. It might make sense because it has changed.
Because they don't really clean up the litter either. I mean, if you look around, you can see the, not just in the oceans, it's,
Yeah.
it's all over the place.
Yeah,
Nobody
it's still,
cleans
it's
up.
amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I still see Iron Eyes Cody, the crying Indian in the canoe, right? And that's where it started with the Keep America Beautiful campaign back, and I still see him. You know, he's still up there because we're still littering, unfortunately. So we'll see. There might be something that the legislature takes up as sort of an add-on to clean communities. We'll have to see. All right, so just my last slide really is, the last couple slides are on what can we do about where we are. You know, so we talked a little bit about where we came from, where we are today, and now, you know, what do we need to do? And in a nutshell, when we started mandatory recycling in 1987, recycling was hardly happening. It was a volunteer thing, and we had to do a whole bunch of stuff to make it work for 567 towns and 9 million people. We should look at the things that we did before and bring a lot of them back. That is in a nutshell. So let's talk about that a little further. One, and this makes me sad, we're not even talking to each other. Under solid waste law, every county has sort of an advisory body to the Board of Freeholders. It's called the Solid Waste Advisory Council, and they exist in the 21 counties. And if somebody wants to come and build a new facility, they have to first go through that SWAC, and they evaluate it, do the homework, and then if it's something that they think is good for the county, they pass it to the elected officials, the Board of Chosen Freeholders, and they make a decision to allow a facility to come in or not allow a facility to come in. We have one of those at the state level as well. It's called the Advisory Council on Solid Waste Management. It's a governor's appointment. I was appointed to this group. I was really honored, like 5 years ago, got a beautiful letter from Governor Christie and everything else. Didn't meet once. My term has already expired. There's something really seriously wrong with that. We're not even talking to each other. So what we've done, there is an Association of New Jersey Recyclers. It's kind of like an interesting group of the 21 counties and private recyclers like Bayshore, Waste Management is part of it, Republic. We're forming our own groups. We're going to try to do it on our own, but the problem is you can only do so much. As an advisory group, you really need government to be a partner. So we have to get over that hump, and we have to start talking to each other in an institutional way again. A subset of that is creating another group called the Market Development Group. I'll ask you a question you don't have to answer. How many of you really understand the stock market? I don't. I mean, like, I know how it basically works. It goes up and down, and it causes all kinds of headlines. I don't really understand it. I've done this stuff for 40 years. I'm not an expert in recycling, far from it. People who buy and sell this stuff every day are like the people on the stock exchange. They're experts in recycling. They're different folks. They have a different mindset. They have a different expertise. We need a separate group of those people to talk about what do we do to stimulate recycling. In this regard, once again, that group, ANGER, the Recycling Association, we worked with Senator Bob Smith, who heads the Senate Environment and Energy Committee. He's a great guy. He passes a lot, pushes through a lot of really proactive environmental stuff. And he did put out a bill, and I'm hopeful that we'll have a chance of it getting passed in lame duck. So by the end of the year, maybe we'll have a bill that sets up this group. In the interim, we're setting up a group that met for the first time this week from our association to at least start doing the homework, start talking to each other. Third thing, keep the recycling fund whole. So this gets a little esoteric, but it's important. Since the beginning of the Recycling Act in '87, we had a tax on disposal to help pay for recycling. It started out $1.50 a ton, and it had a formula in the statute of how that money would be used. And 60% of that money, 40% originally, went to all the towns and the town recycling quarters. Now it's up to 60%. No better use of money. Every town has a recycling coordinator. They're the boots on the ground that make recycling work. So that use of the fund is really, really important. Unfortunately, this fund, similar to Clean Communities, generates about $22 million a year. Every year it gets rated. And we kind of don't, you have to sort of understand the legislative process. You hear about budget time, right? And at the end of every fiscal year, the governor has to have a balanced budget. And sometimes they don't, and they stop the clock and they keep going around the clock until, because they can't go past midnight without a balanced budget. Problem is, when the legislature acts on the budget, it is an act of the legislature. It's just like passing a bill. So they can basically do what they want. So even though this is a dedicated fund you're not allowed to take, every year they take millions of dollars. So one of our pleas is, please don't take our money anymore. We're really at a point where we need every penny of this money. Please don't take our money anymore. Single stream, dual stream, we talked about that. Even this is not simple, right? One logic would be, well, just have all the towns go back to dual stream. That doesn't necessarily work. So Bayshore is in Woodbridge Township, fifth largest town in the state, about 102,000 people, so a big town. And maybe 7, 8 years ago, our mayor went to automated collection. And he went out and spent millions of dollars to buy new collection trucks that are like one-armed bandits that take a certain size receptacle and pick it up. And he went from 2 people on a truck to 1 person on a truck, and the town saved millions of dollars. It was a really fiscally prudent thing for the mayor to do. They can't now say, oh, we're going to go back to dual stream, because they'd have to buy all new trucks again. You get the point. It doesn't work everywhere. California, very progressive state, always the most progressive state environmentally. Just last month, end of September, they passed a bill that talks about going back to dual stream, but doesn't make it mandatory. And that's probably the right answer. Probably the right answer is like to give towns a nudge, And I'll tell you, here's like the bottom line. If you're in a town, you have to have a budget. And what do mayors win and lose on? Raising taxes or not raising taxes. It's extremely important, right? So think about the numbers I threw out. A couple of years ago, the town was getting significant amounts of money for their stuff in recycling. Overnight, seemingly they're paying single stream $65 a ton. Dual stream, they're paying more like $35 a ton. That's significant. That's significant. So here at least, I think we have an economic incentive for towns that can to go back to dual stream. Now they're going to have to take the grief that might come from residents who are like, wait a minute, I got to do that again, I don't want to go. That's going to be a choice. And it really, the way our democracy works, that should be the choice of each town. Each town should make their own choice, in my opinion. Contamination campaign, we kind of talked about it. State and the counties are doing a lot. The term of art is recycle right. And they're putting out a lot of promotional material on what you should and shouldn't recycle. In Middlesex County, I'm on our Solid Waste Advisory Council, so I'm most familiar with that county. They even got refrigerator magnets, like thousands and thousands of them. I think that's a really good use of money, because it's really clear. It says, recycle this, don't recycle that. You put it on the refrigerator, and most people are so busy, right, in life, that they've got a lot of stuff to do. If you have a little cheat sheet, that's a really good thing. And that simple kind of stuff can make a big difference, and it improves the quality of the stuff so that recycling can be sustainable and you can market the material. Public education campaign, we have a state campaign that it's good stuff. It's contamination, but it's really it's a bunch of Facebook posts that you can take off a shelf and use, and Twitter things, and that's good. But it's not really, I think, what we need. When we started recycling, we had a statewide campaign. This kind of quite to really date myself here. It was 1987, and at that time, the state hired a public relations firm, Keys Martin, and they came up with a campaign. We had a slogan. And if you remember the old westerns, right, cowboys and Indians, the slogan was, sort it out before you set it out. Recycling, it's the law. And the image was a sheriff's badge. And the image clearly was, if you don't do the right thing, big old bad Sheriff Bob's going to come and throw you in the clinker, right? But we had billboards, radio spots, TV spots. You couldn't lay at the Jersey Shore on the beach or somewhere at the trailers on the airplanes. And that was good. We had a magician, R.E. And it was great. He went to all the schools, and he helped teach the kids about recycling. It was a significant statewide campaign. Remember Governor Kane, New Jersey and you perfect together? Right? Well, that was a very effective campaign for New Jersey's image. I'm suggesting we really have to think about some kind of a campaign to sort of get it right. Standardization. So this goes back to what we talked about. Too many lists, right? Too much confusion. We have to have a discussion. I'm not saying I don't know the answer. We have to get the experts in the room to talk about, should we have a standard list of recyclables at this point in time in New Jersey? And you can kind of think what it would be, and should we stop sort of tinkering on the fringes, which helps cause all the confusion? I'm not saying that's absolutely something we should do, but we really should talk about it. We really should talk about it, because we have to make it simpler, or it's going to continue to have way too much contamination. Single-use plastic bans, I think they're fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Up to 70 towns, any town I get to speak to, I say, please do it if you can. Because if we wait for a statewide law, we might be waiting a really long time. You know, having been at that table for so long, the constituencies are so tough, some of the lobbies are so strong. I'm hopeful that we'll get a state bill, but I'm doubtful, to be honest with you, I'm doubtful. But towns that are doing it, I think it's a great thing. And even though the amount of material we're talking about is small, it really is small, I think it's very powerful because it's from the ground. It's groundswell. It's people being concerned and saying, I don't want this stuff in my environment. And you know what? You know, my wife and I, with 4 kids, we're finally at a point in our life where we travel a little bit, so we've been to Europe a few times. There are no bags. It's like, why do we have that? We don't need it. You know, this is not like plastics are really important in the medical industry and some other industries, like really important. You don't want to mess with that. This is stuff we don't need. We don't need. So the more bans, I think, the better. I talked about the recycling tax. The original recycling tax, 40% went to the towns, some went to the county, some to the state, 10% went to education. 35% of that original fund went to the private sector for low-interest loans to build recycling mills. We need to think about that again. You know, I'll ask you a question. Based on just this talk and what you know about recycling, if you had money, would you go into the recycling industry right now? I don't think so, right? So you get the point. This is what government does. What government does is it jump start things that are good for society and need jump starting. We have to look at that again. And I understand that that's difficult because there's so many priorities, but I think we need to. There's a lot of power in a governor's office. And so we have 3 things at the government level. We have laws passed by a legislature. We have rules passed by administrative agencies like DEP. When I worked at DEP, we had rules that filled this room. We had so many rules. But then you also have executive orders. And an executive order is something that a governor can do easily. It's basically in his power to issue an executive order. And if you're interested in this subject matter, go Google Jim Florio Executive Order 34, 1991, Jim Florio Executive Order 91, 1993 on procurement. A big part of recycling is, back to the arrows and markets, is buying stuff. Your best friend as a recycler is your purchasing agent. And in government, if you take all of government together, it's 20% of the gross domestic product. Significant purchasing power. And if you look at this Executive Order 91 from Governor Florio, it'll make your head explode. It's incredibly comprehensive. Unbelievable. You know, it started out for paper. Paper was kind of like the big material they were trying to jumpstart. It required every government agency to buy paper, 55% of their paper, with at least 25% post-consumer content in the first year. And there was a 15% price preference. So that meant if you had a virgin product that was cheaper, but it wasn't more than 15% cheaper, you had to buy the recycled product. And then every year, those numbers went up. 25% post-consumer, 30%, 35%, 45%, 50% post-consumer. What does that do if you're a manufacturer? It drives the marketplace. You say, okay, if I want to continue to have that big state contract, I got to make stuff and use recycled post-consumer content, which stimulates markets. And even this executive order, I can't even do it justice. We need an hour of all the detail it had, you know, but it dealt with paper, rubber-modified asphalt, compost by DOT, and embankments of stuff that they use, glass fault. You know, it went on and on. Really progressive stuff.
What are those numbers again?
Sorry?
37 and 91?
34 is on state agency recycling, because shouldn't government be recycling? Right? Practice what you preach. So we should dust that one off. 91 is on purchasing, and it's really powerful. And you know what? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Take it off the shelf.
Didn't they call that the toilet paper tax when Florio was trying to do it? The Republicans were calling it a toilet paper tax.
Yeah, exactly. Good memory. Yeah, good memory. But then, if you read it, you'd say, oh my goodness, this is the kind of stuff we should have right now. And you know what? Nobody ever repealed it. You wonder what happens to this stuff. It's like, let me just stop doing it. It never got repealed. It's like, gee, what happened? Expanded procurement specifications is another market-driven thing. This is kind of a tough one. So we talked about glass being very problematic. You can use glass in roads. right? It's called glass fall. So when you go out west or in Arizona or New Mexico and the road's kind of shiny at night, it's got glass in it, right? So you could put glass in, you could put tires, you could put rubber. It's called rubber modified asphalt. We could probably put more of that stuff in our road mix, but that's something that has to be approved by the Department of Transportation. And their job, absolutely, without question, is public safety. So first and foremost, it has to be proven that it's not going to in any way detract from the road for public health and safety. But we should be having that discussion again. We should be talking about any place that we can expand a market by our own hand in government, we should be doing it. Food waste, I mentioned, very, very exciting, and I'll throw out some metrics here that it still makes my head explode. 40% of all food manufactured goes to waste. 40%. We sit here today in the state of New Jersey, which is the second most affluent state in the most affluent industrialized country in the world. 11% of our population is underserved for food. 15% of our population is underserved, 18 and under. Our kids don't have enough food to eat. That's a disgrace. That's a disgrace. And we've never really focused on it in a systematic way. In 2017, Governor Christie signed a very important bill. It's called Food Waste Reduction Act. And it required that we as a state reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. And it asked DEP to come up with a plan for how to do that. That plan came out late, but it came out. It came out in September, and I think it's pretty good. They had regional public hearings. They got to testify at the public hearings. And if anybody's interested in it, just give me a card or your name, and I'll be happy to send it to you, and you can see it. I think it's very exciting. The state, another bill was passed just in May, that creates a food waste reduction council. So like I said, we're not talking to each other. In this area, the state did create a council. It's under the Department of Human Services to get experts together to talk about how do we reduce food. And a lot of this stuff, like you read it and you're like, oh my goodness, date labels on food, nonsense. They're absolute nonsense. They're marketing ploys. Not for stuff like milk, like perishables. Anything that can't, it's nonsense. There's always been this conception, I can't donate food. If I'm a restaurant, a fast food place, I'm going to get in trouble. There's been a Good Samaritan law that gives indemnification, which means you're not going to get in trouble, since 1982 in New Jersey. And that was a federal law, that's a Good Samaritan Act, that was passed after that. So it's very clear, unless you do something malicious, you're protected. That's not even known. So this is really good stuff, that we're getting this word out. And we have a very vibrant community of nonprofits that are out there today that are collecting food. And like I went to some of these places, it's really a sophisticated business. They have a whole set of clients who are restaurants, supermarkets, whatever it is. They have a whole set of donors and then clients. So soup kitchens, churches, other facilities. They have a refrigerated box truck. They count everything. They have great metrics on what they're doing, but it's totally decentralized. So with a plan, like what do we do today with GPS, right? If we look at an ad on something, don't we get like 10 ads the next day for the same product, right? So think about what we can do to kind of piece together where hungry people live, where we have the provision of nonprofits, and where we don't have the provision of nonprofits, and we can fill that gap. It's very exciting. It's so rudimentary, it's unbelievable, but I think it's terrific. On the other side, New Jersey's kind of way behind on disposal ban legislation. All the northeastern states have disposal ban legislation. Again, working with that Association of Recyclers, I was primary author of a bill 6 years ago that would ban the disposal of food. And it's not like an outright ban, it's only from really big generators, 104 ton per year. So that's like colleges, universities, supermarkets, prisons, big places. And it's only banned if you have a place to bring your stuff. Doesn't that make sense? And it has to be within 25 road miles to a compost facility. So that for transportation costs, it's not unreasonable. And the last part we put in is you can't pay more as a generator than what you're paying now. So how can you go wrong, right? Well, landfill counties in the state build landfills, and they have to, by federal law, collect methane gas. And they have raised opposition to to this bill. So we had something happen I've never seen happen in my 40 years. We had this bill. When I first wrote this thing, there were no exemptions. And then systematically over time, more and more exemptions got added. The legislature passed this bill in June. So the first page of the bill says we're going to recycle food waste. A page later, all 21 counties were exempt. Means absolutely nothing. So what do? You don't like sit there and kind of cry your milk, right? We was passed by the Assembly. We knew the Senate was going to pass it. We ran right in. We were very fortunate to get in with the governor's office, governor's council, governor's legislative liaison. We made our case. We said the governor's going to be the laughingstock of the country if he signs this bill. And insult to injury, it really exempts explicitly landfills and incinerators. So you can interpret that what it's really saying is, in New Jersey, landfilling and incineration is recycling. It's not that way anywhere. It's ridiculous. So fortunately, the right thing happens, and Governor Murphy vetoed the bill a couple months ago. We took all the exemptions out, so it's back to the way we originally wrote it. But it doesn't mean anything yet. So now the legislature, when they come back and lame duck, they have three choices. They can either reject it, they can accept it as conditionally vetoed, or they can do nothing. And if they do nothing, it evaporates. And what happens, and a lot of times folks don't know this, when you hear bills all the time that are proposed, they're only for 2 years. And every 2 years, all the bills that are in the hopper get thrown out, and you got to start again. So we would have to start again. So what we're going to do, I think, because this gets crazy, is we're going to focus more on the front end of food waste. Some very exciting things are happening around the country, and I'll give a shout out to Philadelphia, which has always been like so behind everybody because of all the, it's hard to recycle in a 2 million person city. They have a community compost network initiative where they went out and they found 25 sites in all the different neighborhoods in Philadelphia, and they're developing community gardens. And they're inviting not just the people who are growing stuff there, all the people in the community to bring their stuff. Doesn't that make sense? Mm-hmm. And today, I'll tell you, and I don't say this at all disrespectfully, do you know, like I call it the Darth Vader helmet recyclers, the little plastic things that you put your food in, right? There's no automation to it, it's just a black piece of plastic. You can't have one of those at a community garden today without a DEP permit. You can't do anything. You can't bring any material from off-site into that garden. And we're working with DEP. DEP wants to change it, but it takes 2 years to change the law. So we're trying to figure out a master plan, if you will, for organics that starts at the lowest level. And there are some small technologies that are in vessel, meaning that it's not just nature operating, it's in a tube that turns, and it's either aerobic, meaning you pump air in, or you take all the air out and it's anaerobic. And some of the smaller ones work really, really well. The poster child facility is Kane University. Kane has about 17,000 students, so it's kind of sort of the size of a small New Jersey town. They have a facility it's smaller than this room. It's in a greenhouse, so it shows transparency. It's sited right amidst the 5 dorms, so if it stinks, you have an uprising. It doesn't stink. The kids operate it. They got a cabinet maker to donate shavings of wood, and in composting, you know this carbon-nitrogen ratio, you need a bulking agent, so you have the wood that goes in with the food. It's a round cylinder that turns like once a day. In 5 days, it produces the most gorgeous soil amendment you'll ever see. It's not a compost. That's more complicated. You have to meet certain federal standards for pathogen reduction, all this stuff, but it's a soil amendment, which means you can put it on the ground. They've got a farm. They've got a great farm. Really big tomatoes with this great stuff that you make. But you get the point. I think we need to focus societally on the smaller end, because the bigger facilities have all had problems from orders. So food waste, sort of labor to get excited, it's a really exciting area. And it's 25% of what's still in the garbage can, so I think we can make a big difference going after food waste. Research and development, and this is an interesting thing from my experience in this stuff. You hear the term zero waste a lot of times, and people react to that in interesting ways. I personally like that goal, because I think you should have a goal. You should always have a goal, and that's a great goal, to get to zero waste. A lot of people bristle at that because we're so far from it, And I think that's okay. You know, it depends on your own, persuasion. From my experience, everything is recyclable. Zero waste is attainable technologically today. Economically, we're far from it. That's the problem. It's not that technology doesn't exist. There's amazing technology. You can take plastics, and there's a facility in Canada that takes mixed plastics, and they co-locate next to a cosmetic manufacturing facility. They manufacture wax out of the plastic, and they make cosmetics. This kind of stuff, I could go down the list with every material. Tires, there's pyrolytic and cryogenic ice cracking, smacking technology where you can extract all the elemental chemicals out of the tire and manufacture what's called carbon black, which is a filtration material used for air pollution control. It's a charcoal filter. Again, I can go down every material.